Good morning, everyone. Just give another minute for anyone else who's joining to hop on. And all of this information will be recorded and available. So if you registered, you'll get an email following with the information about the recording. And so if you have to hop off early or anything like that, that will be available to you. So we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Sam Tank, and I am helping to facilitate this webinar that Taja is actually going to be really leading today. Taja, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I am Taja Tucker Silva. I am a data analyst at the Great Lakes Commission. I work on a bunch of different aquatic invasive species projects, including the European Frog-BATT Collaborative.
So before Taja goes into what we're here to talk about, which is the Frog-BATT application or the before and after treatment tracker, I'm just going to give a little bit of background on the collaborative and some other resources that I think might be helpful to folks this field season. There we go. Whoop, now I'm going too far. Okay, so just a little bit of history of the collaborative. This is actually not a super new collaborative, been around for about 8 years at this point. The collaborative was originally established in 2018, but it was just focused on the coordination and collaboration among stakeholders within Michigan. Well, we know that European frog-BATT has spread, unfortunately, across a lot of the Great Lakes region. And because of that, there was interest from other Great Lakes jurisdictions to expand the collaborative. And so that's what we did at the Great Lakes Commission. We took the role of neutral facilitator and backbone support for the collaborative. And in 2022, it was expanded to serve the interests of the entire Great Lakes region. We have a pretty broad membership of the collaborative, and so really anyone who is either conducting research or managing or monitoring or is impacted by European Frog-BATT can participate. Our membership currently consists of state, provincial, tribal, local governments. I don't have it on here, but federal governments as well, local conservation groups and other entities. And what we're really trying to do with the collaborative is facilitate the exchange of information between scientists, managers, stakeholders, with kind of those three main categories, and provide ongoing guidance and support EFB management and control activities. The collaborative established a regional strategy back in 2024, and it is a 3-year strategy, so all of 2024, 2025, and 2026. And so we're kind of at the latter half of the regional strategy. This can be found on our website. There'll be links that we can share to the website in the chat, so look out for those. But the regional strategy is really what we've been doing over the past 2.5, what we'll be doing over the past 3 years to advance our mission, which is to minimize impacts of European frog-BATT within the Great Lakes ecosystem and economy through European frog-BATT preservation, prevention, detection, and control efforts. So we have a number of work groups that consist of staff and collaborative members who have been working to advance this strategy that we're on track to wrap up by the end of 2026. So one of the work groups is our education outreach work group, and there's just so many really amazing resources that I did just want to go through and highlight those. So lots of these resources that have been created through this work group are developed to help provide managers with the most up-to-date scientific information. And we do that through resource development, but also through presentations, conference sessions, things like that. But some of the resources that I wanted to highlight include a duck hunter outreach guide. So this is a pamphlet that was developed specifically for the duck hunter audience, which it seems like this is an audience group that more and more local entities are really focusing their outreach on. And so that's available for anyone to print and use. We also have a lookalikes fact sheet. And so this is something that can be really helpful out into the field. There are a lot of plants that have a similar leaf shape to European frog-BATT. And so this can really help when you're early on in identifying or surveying for European frog-BATT to make sure that it truly is European frog-BATT and not one of the common lookalike species. There we go. We also have guidance in the form of this flow chart that you can see over on the left-hand side of the screen that provides 3 useful steps and some different links and other resources for when you have initially spotted European frog-BATT. So what can you do? We also have some audience-specific resources. One of them that we've created is for specifically for lake associations, because this is a group that is often impacted by and cares about European frog-BATT control. And then one of the things that we have is a lot of shareable social media resources as well. So if you're planning an outreach event or if you're interested in spreading more awareness or good habits, we have a lot of templates and language that can be accessed. So this is all available under a resource library on the website. Everything that is kind of tagged as fully shareable, you're welcome to take, modify without credit. There are some resources that we ask that you provide credit, but all of those are denoted within that resource library. And then the other work group that I wanted to talk about is our research work group. And so this is something that we're currently in the process of we are currently, this work group is currently in the process of developing some really, I think, high impact resources for the frog-BATT community. So we've recently conducted and are finalizing a literature review, and this fills in a lot of the kind of research or identifies a lot of the research gaps, which we're going to then put into a research agenda, which we hope will drive future efforts, including funding and academic interests. So be on the lookout for that, and we anticipate having that available at the end of the calendar year. And I'll just wrap up with there's kind of like a lot of ways to engage with the collaborative. We have our website, we have a newsletter, which we call the Frog-BATT Forum, and that goes out quarterly. We have a dedicated email address if you're interested in reaching out and asking questions. And then, of course, we have our web hub with all of our available applications that we support. So feel free to check out this link. We'll put it in the chat as well. And then if you're interested in engaging with the collaborative membership, we do have a listserv that you're also able to join as well. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Taja now. Well, we're just going to ask that everyone have their cameras off just to save bandwidth. But if you have a question, you're welcome to use the chat feature, or you can use the Q&A. I think the chat's probably a little bit easier to navigate. And you can feel free to raise your hand and we can call on you if you want to unmute and ask a question that way. Again, this webinar will be recorded and accessible on our website and probably just a few days after. And so with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Taja.
All right, thanks, Sam. So now we're going to talk about Frog-BATT. So what is Frog-BATT? And I should mention also, we've shown her a few times, but this is our mascot, Froggy, she's the mascot for the European Frog-BATT Collaborative. Okay, so what is Frog-BATT? So first of all, it is the Frog-BATT before and after treatment tracker. And this just provides us a standardized monitoring and management data collection protocol for European frog-BATT. Oh, my clicking is a little slow here. There we go. And so the primary way that people can interact with Frog-BATT is through this ArcGIS Online Field Maps application, which is available for both Android and Apple devices. And the main thing that we're trying to do with this app is answer the questions: how well did management of EFB work at a specific location and across the Great Lakes Basin? And what types of management techniques are most effective for Frog-BATT? And if you're familiar with the old protocol that Michigan used to have, it was called the STIMP, or the Standard Treatment Impact Monitoring Protocol. It's honestly very similar. We've taken a lot of the questions from that and kind of repackaged it into a format that is a bit easier for us to analyze the data. It's a little bit more repeatable, easier to track what is happening in a given area. And we've tried to set it up similar to the way that the Phragmites Adaptive Management Framework, or PAMF, is set up. So if you're familiar with PAMF, the process is pretty similar. And the data is analyzed by us at the Great Lakes Commission, specifically me, on a yearly basis. So one thing I wanted to note that there was a little bit of confusion about in the past is we have a couple different applications here at the commission that we host for the Frog-BATT Collaborative, and one of them is Frog-BATT, and the other one is the delimitation app. These two are not connected in any way. You don't need to, use the delimitation app in order to use Frog-BATT or vice versa. They're totally two different disconnected things. And I just wanted to bring this up just to note the differences between them. So Frog-BATT is more of a longer term management project, and it requires a bit of planning before starting. Typically, I wouldn't say you can just go out in the field and just start doing it. Watching this webinar, watching the other tutorial video we have online, or reading the SOP, is pretty helpful before you get started. Whereas the delimitation app is where you're basically just going out and surveying for Frog-BATT, you're capturing presence absence data on the fly as part of early detection rapid response efforts. So two different apps. So how is the data used? So we are developing our Shiny application. Everyone will get a username and password. This is actually separate from the Field Maps application, but it will show how your data is analyzed. So this will just be a standard, URL you can go to. It is coming soon. It's been in development for a while. It got slowed down because one of our packages I was using had some issues, and I tried to report it to the package maintainers and never heard back. But now that I'm just going to plow through and keep going, and hopefully this will be done soon. But the idea behind our Shiny app is it will analyze the changes in cover and plant community from your monitoring reports and your management reports. It's also going to look at results compiled across the Great Lakes Basin. And then we'll also be reporting the overall results on the EFB Collaborative website when we have them. I wanted to make a note about data privacy. So we have a little data privacy notice in the SOP that mentions, just very briefly, like, we're not reporting any of your, personal names and identifying information unless, we get your permission. But you will be able to see any other Frog-BATT users' information within the Frog-BATT application or within the ArcGIS online group, but the group is private. So just, you might want to check out the data privacy thing if that is of concern to you in the SOP. And here's just a little preview of what this Shiny app will look like. I mean, this is the very, very rough draft. I'm going to clean it up so it actually looks good. But it'll show you all of the different reports in your packages, your data packages, we call them. And then it'll tell you some analysis of did things change, what changed, and more. So in order to use Frog-BATT, there's a little bit of setup on the front end. You need to have a ArcGIS Online username or account, I should say. And if you don't, we are able to provide through the Great Lakes Commission community accounts for free. So if that's something that you need, feel free to contact us. We can set you up with that. But otherwise, you can just join the EFB ArcGIS Online group. And all of the materials and the instructions for how to do this are on our hub site. So that is at hub.efbcollaborative.net. So there's information about how to join, how to access the site, how to access the ArcGIS Online group, all on the front page there. And then there is a tab up at the top for delimitation, Frog-BATT, and the prioritization app. So we want Frog-BATT. And all of the different materials that are associated with the program are on here, like the standard operating procedure. There's a link to the Field Maps app. There's a video tutorial. I would highly recommend reading through the SOP. I think that it is super helpful. I'm going to go through it here as well. And I'll note that the video tutorial that is on there is more about how to use the actual application rather than the nuts and bolts of Frog-BATT or the theory behind it. Okay, so how does it work? So this is the basic order of operations. Say that we have a pond in this example of Frog-BATT that we want to manage, and maybe we want to enroll this in Frog-BATT. So the first step of Frog-BATT is to enroll a management zone. And so this is what happens in the app. You'll basically draw a polygon around the area that you want to manage Frog-BATT in. And I'll talk about what makes a good management zone in a bit, or how you want to designate one. But the way you can kind of think of this management zone is it's kind of a container for all of your data. So all of your different reports and photos, they're all kind of belong to this management zone. Okay, so after you've enrolled your management zone, you can monitor your site before treatment. So you'll add a monitoring report to your zone, and then you will add monitoring quadrats to that zone. I'm going to talk about monitoring in a second. And then next you will manage your site, and that adds another management report to your zone, and then you will monitor that site after treatment. So we've got this before and after treatment look at your site, so we know how well the management worked. And I'll talk more about timing of monitoring, timing of management. Unlike the Phragmites Adaptive Management Framework, which has very rigid definitions of when you should be doing each of these things, with Frog-BATT, it's kind of up to you. We have some general recommendations, and I'll go over those in a bit. But really, it depends on the timing of what Frog-BATT is doing in your region. We have some general guidelines of in the SOP, that's what this image is from, with the timing of when germination, when the daughter plants form, flowering, seed pods, chorions. You want to kind of consider when that kind of stuff is happening, because ideally you're managing your site before the seeds and the turions are being produced. And yeah, just some things to consider, which I'll go over timing in a second. All right, but first let's talk about some guidelines for enrolling management zones. As I mentioned before, that management zone is just kind of a container for all of your records. So that has to be created before you can add any monitoring or management records or put down any quadrats. You can enroll a management zone at any time of year. You could do it in the middle of winter, it doesn't matter. But we would recommend that you are considering where EFB is actually growing. If you're going out in the spring and EFB is not growing yet, clearly you're not going to know the best extent of how to delineate this management zone. But if you have, drone photos or something like that, you can use that. And in the application, your management zone should not be overlapping any other management zone. And that's just an issue with ArcGIS. If they start overlapping, things get weird with calculations. So don't recommend that. And you should pick a representative area. We recommend something that is bigger than 10 by 10 meters, because that is kind of the limits of GPS accuracy, but typically something less than half an acre. And that is mainly for your benefit, because you don't really want to be tromping through a giant area to try to monitor it. In some cases, that might just not be safe. Also, the way that the application works is that it generates a random number of quadrats based on the size of your management zone. So we recommend like the minimum, I believe, is 4 per management zone that it generates. But if you have a huge management unit, it's going to start generating a whole bunch more that it recommends that you collect. Um, so even if you are managing a larger area, like a whole huge lake or something that's many acres, we would still recommend just choosing a portion of it to enroll as a management zone rather than the whole thing. And I'll talk about some considerations for that in a second. Um, and then you can enroll as many management units as you want or zones as you want. There's no limit. And you also want to just consider access. Like I said, like you don't want to enroll a zone that you think is going to be very difficult to get to year after year because this is kind of a longer term project. You're at least going to look at this site within, you're going to monitor it, you're going to manage it, and then you're going to monitor it again. So like you don't want to pick something that is very difficult to get out to because otherwise you might not be able to collect that data. And next we're going to consider the habitat. So if we look at, this is kind of at the broader landscape zone. We've got a little tiny froggy here for scale and some trees. So if you think about like having like a very big lake and you've got some frog-BATT along the edges, and you think, oh, okay, I would like to, maybe this is my management zone that I enroll. This is the polygon that I've drawn. Well, the problem is if you've got a really big open lake like this, and there's a lot of wave action, that frog-BATT could move. So it's a floating plant. It could just get shifted to the other side of the lake, and then your management zone is empty. And so that's probably not a good candidate site for a management zone. However, if you have a lake where there's like a small bay or an inlet, um, I think this would be a really good management zone because it's less likely that frog-BATT is going to move out of that area. Similarly, if this is kind of, again, froggy to scale, like if we've got like a smaller area, like a little retention pond or a ditch or something where frog-BATT is not going anywhere, then this is a really good candidate for a management zone. And you could just, draw your polygon around the whole thing. So basically, we want to account for wave action because that is mainly the thing that is going to skew our results the most. There are a couple things you will need to monitor. Well, first of all, you will need a cell phone or tablet or some sort of device that can use ArcGIS Field Maps app. And then you will have to have the Frog-BATT for Field Maps map on that. You will also need a 1 meter squared quadrat. We have some instructions if you need them on how to build those in the SOP. And you will also need some way to measure water depth. So whether that be a meter stick or some sort of gauge pole, um, something to measure water depth. So let's talk about when to monitor. As I mentioned before, we don't have strict guidelines on this. It really is your choice of when to monitor pre or post management. But we've outlined some general guidelines in the SOP that I think are helpful. So for pre-treatment, so before your management actions, we recommend going out within the 2 weeks prior to the planned treatment date, as close to the treatment date as possible. If you have control zones. Oh, I forgot to mention this. So there is the option of when you enroll in your management zone, you can choose it either being a treatment site or a control site. So if you were doing like some hardcore research and you want to provide us with a control site where you are not managing Frog-BATT, you can enroll it as such. So you will just be submitting monitoring reports and you will not be submitting any management reports for that. So if you are doing a control zone where you're not managing, try to monitor those at the same time or around the same time as any ones that are designated as treatment zones. For post-treatment, so this is going to depend on your goals and the treatment type. So it takes a few weeks usually for herbicides to systematically affect the plants. I mean, some herbicides are super effective and kill them right away. Other ones take a while. So we recommend, a few weeks, at least a month post herbicide to do your monitoring. And you can also decide whether you are interested more in the single season impact or a long-term impact. So that means whether you want to sample within the same season as the treatment. So basically you monitor, you manage, and then, like a month later, you monitor again. You want to know like right away what the impacts are. That is an acceptable way to do it. If you're working on more of a long-term project, then it works a little bit more like the Frag-BATT adaptive management framework, where you're doing it on a yearly basis. So you monitor the following growing season, and that monitoring report actually serves as your pre-treatment monitoring for the next year. So as opposed to monitoring 2 times in a year, you're monitoring just once each year, pre and post management. So it's really up to you how you want to do this. It also might depend on your funding and how that works. Um, Oh, and for post-treatment, we recommend trying to not wait so long that the frog bit is naturally senescing or dying off. Because if it is doing that, then it will definitely alter our results. Because then we don't know, is this frog bit dying because it's just senescing because it's fall and that's what it does? Or is it dying because we treated it with some kind of herbicide? So we have a few monitoring tips. And I think I forgot to mention, but I'm going to basically go through um, kind of the background of Frog-BATT, and then at the end, I'm going to do a short phone tutorial of just how to do all of this different stuff. Um, okay, getting back to this though. You must create a monitoring record in the app before you can lay down quadrat points. And so this is kind of like a little form that you'll fill out for the management zone. It's got some overall information about the site. It's very short. And then once that is added, you can start adding your quadrat points. So I'll show you how to do that after this section of the presentation. But when you are monitoring, you will have to choose your own quadrat locations. We don't generate them for you. And the reason why we don't generate them for you is because, I mean, Frogbit is generally not distributed evenly, across the landscape. And so I think it would really help in order to rather than us providing you with guidance, like follow the flowcharts that we have in the SOP to figure out your own monitoring locations. So in order to do that, you kind of have to think about how your management zone is set up and how the frog bed is distributed within it. So you have to think about, okay, well, is it in like one giant clump, like in the top image there, or is it distributed in multiple smaller clumps? And based on that, you can use the flowcharts in our SOP um, to go through those different scenarios. So we have different flowcharts for different scenarios. These look complicated, but like they're actually really simple. It's just like, okay, well, find the longest access of the patch, think about how long it is, um, divide the estimated distance by 4, like flip a coin to decide which way you're going to go, and then, walk to this distance. Once you read through it, it's pretty simple. Or like the one in the middle here is you'll walk to the nearest plant, think of the nearest town, count how many letters are in the name, and then walk that many steps. These are basically the same flowcharts that we have for the Frag-BATT adaptive management framework, if you're familiar with those. You can also, as opposed to going through this, you can generate these points randomly on your own if you are experienced in ArcGIS. It's really up to you. We also ask that that you try to distribute your quadrat locations evenly-ish among the clumps. I mean, we're still trying to keep things random, but like we don't want a situation like at the lower image where all of the quadrat points are in one tiny clump, but then there's like a whole bunch of other frog bit that hasn't been sampled. So a few other rules about placing quadrats. So your quadrats should contain EFB. So unless there is no EFB found or there's not enough EFB to be contained within the required number of quadrats, that's fine. You can report 0 numbers for for EFB, but we are actually trying to assess like how much cover there is of EFB in a given location. So they should not overlap one another, and they should be placed randomly, as I mentioned. And in the Field Maps app, it's important that your quadrat points be within the bounds of the management zone. Sometimes if your GPS is a little wonky and like it's moving around, it's okay if it's like, I don't know, a couple feet outside of it because we can account for that. But pretty much you want to try to keep it within the management zone because what it's going to do is it's going to pull the data from the monitoring report that you entered um, and attach that to the quadrat. So what kind of data are you collecting in these quadrats? So one of the things that we're looking at is the plant community, and there's a couple different ways you can choose to measure it. So you can either do what we call measuring tier 1 cover. So this is kind of like simple plant categories. You don't have to be a plant ID expert in order to do this. Basically, we're just categorizing the amount of cover in your quadrat by these 4 different plant groups. So there's emergent plants or, plants that are coming out of the water. There are floating leaved plants. And so this is things like your general lilies. These are things that are rooted into the ground. And then there's your submergent plants, which are things like milfoil. These are things that are totally underwater. And then our free floating, which is anything like frog-BATT, duckweed, wolfia, little things that are just floating on top of the water but are not rooted. And so it's important because EFB is a free-floating plant that your percent cover that you report for that must also contain the EFB cover because you'll be asked like, how much cover is there of European frog-BATT? And you say like 10%. But then say you've got like a whole like 10% more of duckweed. Then you've got 20% cover of free-floating plants. And I'll show you how that works in the app as well. And then there's also tier 2 cover. So this is where you are really interested in knowing what the plant community is like. And so this requires some genus or species level identification of plants. And so I would, pretty much only recommend this if you want to spend a lot of time in the field and you're really interested in the plant community. You can also submit a partial species list. So say you just want to make a note for your own records, really, like, oh, this is a site where we found invasive phragmites. There's some other invasive plant. You can submit what is called a partial species list, and you could just report the amount of cover of that plant. And so we know, like, we're not going to assess the whole community based on this, but you are able to report other species if you want to. And when in doubt, take a picture. We recommend that for each quadrat that is placed, that you take data for, that you also take a picture and add it to your record. This is not only for us, but also for you. If there's a plant you want to go back and identify later, or if you want to double check the numbers of cover or something, like this is just a handy way to keep track of what was in that quadrat. Moving on to management reports. As I mentioned before about timing, when to manage, again, is up to you, but it's generally recommended that you try to manage before the plants are forming any seeds or turions so that we are not spreading more frog-BATT. And to enter a management report for your zone, you can either add all of your information within the app, or if you are also reporting this to the miss and treatment tracker, which I think is required for a lot of SISMAs, you can also, instead of re-entering all this information, you can just put in the ID, I believe it's just the name of your site within the treatment tracker, and we will link it for you. You don't have to enter this information all over again because we are basically just using the same exact treatment questions as the miss and treatment tracker. So that includes answering questions about, manual control, say you're hand pulling frog-BATT. it will also you can also enter information about chemical control, so any kind of herbicide treatment, mechanical, if you're using some sort of harvester. There's a bunch of different options you can use to enter data about your treatment. And so we recommend that you submit a management form for each type of treatment that is performed. Like say you hand pull 10% of the site and then you herbicide the rest of the site. Those would require two different management reports because you can't submit multiple actions in one report. And you can also use a single management form for just multiple dates. Like say you're herbiciding one day on Monday, and you only get half the site done, and then you come back the next day and finish the other half of the site. That's still just one management report. There's an option to pick multiple days, and you just put your start and your end date. So no need to submit a whole bunch of reports if you're going out multiple times. Like, we don't need 7 hand pull reports from one site. Just one is fine. Okay, so I will hold if there are any questions about the overall, I don't know, basically what I've gone over so far, let me know. And I'm gonna start getting ready to show the app and how that actually works.
Not seeing anything in the chat.
Okay, then I'm going to attempt to share my phone screen. So let's see how this goes. All right, so are we seeing my phone screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so in order to use the app, we just have field maps installed on the phone. And so if you haven't opened up the app before, it's not going to pop up right at the top like I have it. There will actually be a section down below called Groups, and you'll have to navigate to the European Frog-BATT Collaborative, and that is where we have all of our different applications. That's where our delimitation app is and where Frog-BATT lives. There's actually 2 different versions of the Frog-BATT app. So one of them is just called Frog-BATT for field maps, and then one is down at the bottom here, called offline Frog-BATT for field maps. So if you know you're going to be going to sites where there's really bad cell reception, then this is a good option for you because you can download your map ahead of time. You can basically sync the whole, what is the word I'm looking for? The satellite imagery from the area for a given area before you got in the field. And then you can use this without having to worry about it trying to calculate things or do anything. And it will work a lot better than trying to use the fully online version. So there's information about how to use the offline version in the SOP. I should mention that in the SOP, there's also quick guides to how to do all of the different things in the app. But I'm going to just go with the regular, plain old Frog-BATT for field maps. And we recommend that the GPS accuracy that you see here at the top of the screen, that is less than the required amount. Right now, I'm just sitting in my office on Wi-Fi, so it is, not great accuracy, but if I was outside, it would be better. But let's just ignore that for now. So let's just get started from the very beginning. Let's say we want to enroll a management zone, and all you have to do is press the little plus button at the bottom of the screen, and it's going to bring up this cursor that you can move around with your finger by touching the map, essentially. It's a little bit weird, but you'll get used to it. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to add a site or our management zone. And you can either do this by manually drawing it like I'm about to do, or you can stream your location and just, as you walk, it'll draw a boundary for you. If you want to do that, there's this little I wish I could like show you where my finger is hovering. There's these little three dots next to enroll a management dot dot dot. Um, if you click that, there's a little option that says start streaming. So if you press that and you start walking, it'll start following you and draw the polygon as you walk. But I am going to draw it manually. So if we do that, basically I'm going to pick an area to start, move my map around. I will add a point to start it, and then I'll move my map. And as I do that, it will start to create lines. So I'm just adding points to create a polygon. So this is my imaginary management zone. There's also an option here at the top to take a photo or attach something. We would recommend that if you are adding photos to submit your form first and then edit it and add a photo later. I mean, you can certainly take a photo now, but in cases where your internet might be bad, sometimes it like doesn't attach right and can screw up your form. And so it might just be easier to add the picture later. But it's up to you. If you've got good cell reception, don't worry about it. Okay, so up at the top, it is saying, fill out this form to create a new site for Frog-BATT monitoring. There's a link to the SOP there if you need to look at that for any reason. And this is where we start to enter our identifying information for the site. So you have to enter some name that is unique. It will yell at you if it is not unique. Let's call it test webinar. My name. And then if you've used the app before, it will store your organization. So it already knows I'm from the Great Lakes Commission, but otherwise you will just choose your organization from a list. And if your organization is not in the list, I believe there is a way you can enter it manually. Of course, I can't test that out because I'm already in my own organization. But if you would like us to manually add your organization, just email me and I can add it. If you are collecting this data under a specific grant, which there is the only one we have is the Michigan Eagle EFB3 grant. So you can click that if you are enrolling this under that grant. Otherwise, you can leave it blank. And then there are some site details. It nicely calculates your site area in acres for you. And then we will put in our type of water body. I will just call this a ditch. It asks you some questions about the site. So is the water flowing? I will say no. Is it within a certain distance of a public boat launch? No. What is the current EFB invasion stage at this site? I will just say previously detected. We found it here before. And then for this is what I was mentioning briefly earlier. You can decide whether you want this to be a treatment site, so you will be submitting management reports, or this is an untreated control site. So you are just monitoring, and there is EFB, but you are not managing it. So I'm going to say that this is a treatment site. You can also say to be determined if you don't know what you want it to be at. We will bug you at some point, though, if you don't answer it. And then you can answer, okay, has this site been previously treated? So if you click yes, it will pop up a little box about the years that it was treated. So you can list, okay, sure, it was treated in like 2025. Let's just say, okay, these are out of order, but let's just say 2025 and 2024. Sure. And then there's also, we would like people to be as comfortable with the app as possible. And so we have an option for submitting test data. So you can feel free to submit as much test data as you want. We will be deleting it from the real data that we are analyzing. So if you don't delete it yourself, we will be getting rid of it. So we have an option here for submitting test data. So I will click this. Yes, this is a test. And you can enter any notes at the bottom. Up at the top, there is a submit button, and that will create our management zone. All right, there it is. And there's also a little button here. You can edit it. If you scroll over, there is a more button in there. You are able to delete it if you want. And then there's just a summary of the different things that you filled up. This is also how you can find your management records and monitoring records. So say you've created your zone and you want to get back to that screen, all you have to do is click on the zone with your finger and that thing will come back up. Um, okay, let's say we want to start monitoring. The first thing we need to do is submit a monitoring record. So I'm going to click on monitoring records at the bottom. I don't have any for this site yet because it's brand new, but if we had previous monitoring records, they would be here. So I'll add a record and it tells me, okay, this is the name of my site. Here's the number of quadrats I need to collect. I need to collect 4 quadrats based on the size of this management unit. And then it has the monitoring date. I'm going to do it today. You can say whether this is pre or post-treatment monitoring. I will say this is pre-treatment. I'm going to leave that the way it is. Your name. I will say it is helpful. I'm just putting my first name, but it is really helpful for me when I am trying to figure out like who did what, if you have a last name. Because there's been certain times when like I don't know, an organization is missing and I'm trying to figure out who did something. Last names are really helpful to me. And okay, so then we are going to assess the EFB cover for the entire zone. So it mentions zone wide here. So if we look at the entire zone as a whole, we will assess based on the missing cover categories, which range from none, sparse, patchy, dense, and monoculture. So monoculture being nearly 100% of the area, dense 40% of the area or more. Patchy is just like a mix of sparse and dense, and then sparse being scattered stems, very small stands. I'm just going to say this is a monoculture. And then it's going to ask you some questions about the condition of the EFB. So are there flowers? Are there fruits? Are there turions? I'm going to say no. And this is not to say you need to go out and like assess every single plant, just in general, as you're looking around, what do you think? And then there's the option to add notes if you would like. So again, up at the top, there's the submit button. We'll click that to submit our monitoring report. And now you can see that that has a summary of that here. And if we go, I'm going to exit back out of this just to show, like if we click on our management zone again, if we go down to monitoring records, it appears here as a line called test webinar with the date and the time of the monitoring report. So we know we have a monitoring report in here. Okay, so the next step for monitoring, I can't zoom in that far. The next step for monitoring is to add our 4 quadrats that it recommended. So we will again press our plus button and I'll move back over to my zone and say I am right here where my cursor is. I'm going to press quadrats. And the quadrats form, I will say, it does take a second to load, and that is because of that tier 2 monitoring data. It's loading in the whole plant list, which is like thousands of plants that you can choose from. And so it does take a second in order for that to load. Okay, now we are ready. We will add our point. And it is added now that you can see there's like a little orange point where I've added my point. That's what we're going to submit the data for. We'll pick the date. It is saying post-treatment. I've asked our GIS manager to assess why this is happening. It should say pre-treatment because I just submitted a pre-treatment report. So hopefully by today we'll get that fixed. Not a fan of why that is doing that. Because it should be pulling in our last monitoring report. Let's see. So water depth, we'll say, I don't know, 10 centimeters. And then we are going to also assess the EFB cover within our quadrat. So at this location, we have thrown down our 1 by 1 meter quadrat, and we are assessing the things within that quadrat. So if I say that there is 10% EFB cover here, and then we will assess the condition of that EFB on the majority of the plants. So I'm going to say this is some very healthy, good looking EFB. The leaves are green and rigid. looking good. There's also a section where you can put the number of, or the percent senescent or wilting leaves. I'm going to say 0. We're in the thick of growing season. It's looking good. Okay, so now we're going to do that tier 1 monitoring. So that's looking at the high level plant community. And so for this, we are going to think about the emergent plant cover. Let's say that at this site that there's a little bit of Phragmites. I'm going to say 10% Phragmites. Well, I'll get to the tier 2 in a second, but emergent plants, 10%. And then floating leaf plant cover, I don't see any sort of lilies or anything like that. I'm going to say 0. For free floating plant cover, now this does remind you, this should include your European Frog-BATT cover, which we said was, 10% up here. So let's say that we've seen 10% Frog-BATT and 10% duckweed. So that's adding up to 20%. And for submergent plants, let's just say 0. I don't feel like dealing with that. Okay, so now let's say that we want to actually identify all of these plants that we've seen, which you don't have to, but this is just an option. So this is collecting that tier 2 data. So if you want to do that, you say yes. And it does give you a little note. You don't have to report EFB cover again. It's already there. Don't need to do that a second time. But we are going to report that Phragmites and that the duckweed that I mentioned. So if you click on the species, you bring up this giant species list. I would recommend searching it as opposed to trying to scroll through it because it's many, 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 many species. So I'm just going to start typing Phragmites. We also have the common names and the scientific names in here, so you can search by either one. I'm going to say this is the invasive common reed. There's also options. If you're doing Phragmites, there's options for native, non-native, and then just Phragmites. I don't know what kind it is. I believe I said that was 10% cover, so 10% for that species. I think I also said, 10% for my imaginary duckweed. So I will say duckweed and 10% for that. And it will keep popping up options for more and more species. I think our limit is 20. I I asked the folks from Wisconsin DNR who do this all the time. Like I was like, what is the max number of species you found in a 1 meter quadrat? And I think they said it was 16. So you should be good with 20. I would really hope that you aren't finding more than 20 species of plants in your 1 meter quadrat. That would be wild. So once you're done, you'll just leave the last species blank. And as I mentioned before, there is the option to submit a partial species list. We are not doing that. This is a full species list, so I'm going to keep that at no. And then again, you can say, is this test data? Yes, it is. It's a test. That helps me. So submit. And you can also add an image to this of your quadrat. Okay, so we are starting to run out of time. So very briefly, I am going to show you the management report. So again, you click on your management zone. Go down to the bottom, there are management records. And very much like adding a monitoring record, you click add, my name, and then how many times was the site managed? So this is getting at, did you go out 5 times or 1 time? So let's just say we went out like 2 times to hand pull this site. So it's going to ask me for a management date. It's also going to ask me the start and end dates. I'm just going to say today and tomorrow. And now it's asking you what percentage of the live EFB in the management zone was treated/removed. So considering this whole zone for this management report, how much was removed? I'm going to say only 26 to 50%. It was too much. There's a lot to hand pull. If you are using the missing treatment tracker and you don't want to enter in all your information again, you can click yes. You can put in the treatment tracker ID, but we are not doing that, so I'm going to click no. And then you can choose your control method. If I'm doing manual, hand removal, I click manual, I say hand pull, I can note any other equipment used. I can put in the total person hours and any notes about my management. This is very simple for hand pull. There's not much to report on. But if you're doing something like chemical, so that's any kind of herbicide, there is a lot more to fill out. So there's stuff about the application method, the chemical used, the way that the chemical was applied. Did you use a backpack sprayer? What kind of herbicide did you use? What was the concentration, total ingredients? And this is all stuff that if you've recorded in the treatment tracker already, we can import. So no worries about trying to fill this out. Yeah, there's a lot of questions for herbicide. So the number of questions will vary based on the type of management you are doing. Like for instance, if you are doing mechanical, it will ask you like the type of equipment you are using, any other equipment used that is not on our list, and any other notes in the total person hours. So again, mechanical is pretty low in terms of questions. Okay, so that is pretty much the overview. If you want to, I'm gonna delete this management unit because I don't need it. So I'm gonna delete it. I'll show you how to do that briefly. Might take a second because I've got a few records here. But that will delete the associated management records and monitoring records. If you accidentally mess something up, we do back up the database, I think every day during the field season. So if something goes wrong, contact me and we can get your data back. All right, and if you want to click a quadrat point, it's a little bit fussier, but you basically have to click on it and delete it that way. Okay, so I think that is it for the tutorial. Just some quick data management tips. Make sure to, wait, am I sharing my screen, Sam?
Nope, the sharing stop.
Ah, come on. Okay, here we go. So make sure that you quality check your data and enter your data either in the app or via the desktop application on ArcGIS Online. Make sure if you are using the online version to sync your data periodically. There's information about how to do that in the SOP. All of the data must be finalized and ready for analysis by December 1st of each year. And just a general reminder, if you're going out in the field, make sure to clean your equipment, make sure you're not spreading any Frog-BATT or turions. And as I mentioned before, please read the SOP. It has lots of information. It's very helpful. I think that's it. So thank you for checking out the webinar and Frog-BATT. If you have any questions, you can email efb@glc.org or taja@glc.org.
Thanks, Tasha. Lots of great information. We have a couple minutes for questions if anyone on the line does have a question.
Ooh, that's a lot of talking.
Okay, I'm not seeing any, but feel free, reach out anytime, efb@glc.org, and happy frog bidding.
All right, thanks all.